the person you want to become is more important than the things you want to accomplish. Because the person you're becoming will determine how you accomplish the things you're going to accomplish. And how is almost always more important than the what. The what is the goal, the what is the status, it can be whatever you want it to be. How it's done, you could do it unethically, you could do it to cheat your way there, you could do it to hustle your way there and forget your family and lose sight of friendship and community.
Yo, what's going on? This is Streetwise. I'm your host, Matthew McReynolds. With us today is a very, very, very close friend of mine, mentor, and my pastor, Landon Benjamin. Landon, what's up, man? Appreciate you for joining us. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. So we were talking before about kind of the direction that we want to take it. And just to give some context, Streetwise, I'm really trying to tap into a lot of different avenues, but bring it all back to helping individuals combine book smarts with street smarts, but also just opening up their mind to areas in which they typically don't have access to, perspective, mindset that they don't typically have perspective to. So we're talking about business, we're talking about faith, we're talking about leadership and development. So yeah, I previously mentioned you're a pastor, man, and you're the first pastor that I've had on the show. So I'm curious, how did you get into the profession? How do you see your role? And what do most people not understand about what you do that, they might think one thing, but it's actually really different?
Yeah, man. Well, so how did I get in the role? Well, it's pretty it's, I guess, anticlimactic. It's like
It's all good.
my dad was a pastor. My grandpa was a pastor. My great grandpa was a pastor. And I thought I was going to be a golfer. And so I played golf all through junior high and high school and ended up winning state my junior year. And man, that summer, right before my senior year in high school, it just everything changed, man. I can tell you for certain that God found me, and I realized who He was and what He meant to me. And from that point on, it was like I just knew I wasn't supposed to play golf. I knew I was supposed to just somehow help people discover who the God is that found me. And so that's kind of from 17 on, I've known it, and I've kind of aimed my life at it. So I became a youth pastor first at a church called Shady Grove. And then from there, we merged with a church called Gateway Church. Been doing that from youth pastor to young adults pastor to groups pastor to now one of the associate campus pastors. So yeah, just kind of been in it for a while. And man, I don't know. It just has been a journey of discovering myself. There's an ancient father that says, know thyself. And I've realized the further I get into Christ, the deeper I have to go into who I am, my proclivities, my weaknesses, my issues. And I have to go deep inside to discover God within, even amidst some of that junk on the inside. He transforms it. So it's just been a fun journey, man.
Man, okay. So that gets us to becoming a pastor. What is your role actually like? So Gateway is actually a pretty big church. It has multiple campuses, but you're in charge of the Dallas campus, correct?
Yeah. So I'm like the executive pastor of the Dallas campus. And I would say, you asked earlier, like, what is the role and what do people think it is versus what is it actually?
Yeah, that's where we're going. Yeah.
I think people think being a pastor is like really all about preaching or teaching the word. And that's maybe, oh my gosh. I mean, especially for our context, that's less than 10% of what I do on a day-to-day basis. It feels a lot more like a corporate organization in the fact that we manage budgets, we have direct reports, we have to manage those people. We're pushing towards strategic goals. And it kind of feels like you're more in a corporate setting, leading an entity forward if you don't watch out. So those roles, that's what I'm really passionate about, helping our pastors remember what it's all about being a pastor. And it's not about those things. Those are useful. We need to be good stewards of budgets. We need to help strategically move things forward. But at the same time, we're called by God to help other people grow in their faith, to help other people become like Jesus. We're here to shoulder burdens, to come alongside people and love on them in difficult situations. It's twofold. It's like, of course, it's a lot of leadership, and at the other hand, man, it's a lot of like having just really difficult conversations and sitting with people who are going through intense tragedy and then great victories and all in between. So yeah, it's probably about it.
Wow. As no, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack for sure. As a leader in the organization, I'll ask how many people are under you within the campus that you work at.
So we have a total of 37 staff, and I am responsible, not directly, but my downline is responsible for about half of those staff members and the ministries that are involved. So I'm responsible for sort of all of our next gen ministries and then all of our connection ministries. So pastoral care, weekend services, outreach events and stuff like that. It's about half of our, if you would, half of our church that I have the privilege to just come alongside and help and serve.
That's okay. So that gives a really good picture. So you said you started out at the beginning of your journey as a youth pastor, and you've come to now an executive pastor of a campus of a fairly large church. How have you had to develop as a leader? So there's leadership, but there's also spiritual leadership. How do you decipher between those two?
Yeah, man, it's such a great question. I say for me, I was quickly aware of my deficiencies. I realized when I became a youth pastor, it was like, man, we're just going to have these great events and be creative and like invite people and have a great time. And then I realized, oh, there's leaders that I got to take care of and love on and make sure they're growing. And then when I got the next responsibility, it was more adults, more leaders. And I'm realizing, oh, shoot, I have there's I have to be an example here. And everything began to really hit me. And I think the further I progressed, the more I realized that this is not about anybody else but me growing towards Jesus. And by that, I mean, if I'm not being an example, if it's not true in me, then it can't be true through me to other people. It has to be authentically real. The work of Jesus, what he's done, what he's doing has to be real inside of me before it can be real inside of somebody else through me. And so I had to start doing this deep work. It took me on this long journey. Some would call it deconstruction. I just called it like discovering Jesus, discovering what he's done throughout history, what we call in the church spiritual formation. When you say, what did you have to do to grow? I had to realize that there was some stuff in my life that was not okay. And I had to find freedom and healing and then learn how to invite Jesus into that brokenness and see him restore that thing in me. And then I come to find out now then people around me are getting restored and healed because he's done it in me. He can do it through me. So then once I figured that out, I'm like, oh man, now I got to learn leadership principles. Now there's staff members, and not just spiritually, but now there's staff members, and how do I handle them? How do we navigate a team towards a strategic goal, and how do we accomplish that goal efficiently? So then I just started inhaling leadership content, just, okay, what do I do here? My journey is like, in our context, you can't just, it's not one or the other, it's both and. It's both spiritual leadership and it's, if you will, corporate leadership. I'm really passionate about making sure that spiritual pursuit just sort of stays a little ahead of the leadership kind of concept.
I can see that being a total like back and forth balance as you grow personally. I remember back when I was a life coach at Cornerstone Crossroads in South Dallas, and I was being asked to, well, my job as a life coach was feeding into these kids, and it was a Christian school. And so everything went back to Christ and leading the kids in the community that way. And I realized that if I wasn't feeding myself and filling my cup, man, I had nothing to give. So that actually works well into my next kind of question or thought that I'm interested in. As you're leading an organization, but also spiritually leading and mentoring people, how do you continue to like refill your own cup and make sure you're not just consistently pouring out to others? How do you balance? Is there a balance?
There's just no way in our day and age that we can have anything to give another person if we're not consistently spending time shutting things off in our life. So how do I fill up my cup? I fill up my cup spiritually by quiet. There's so much noise around us. There's so much distraction around us that I have to intentionally set aside time to be still and be quiet. And of course, I'm a pastor. I promise you, when I'm still and quiet, I believe that God is love, and love is relational. In fact, he is not just a being, he's represented as three beings. He is one as a whole, but he's called the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Spirit, which connect in perfect relationship. So as I sit in silence and shut the world out, if you will, shut the noise out, the distraction out, phones down, music even off, and I still my soul before the Lord, I believe he's relational with me. So he speaks to me. I had these random thoughts that come to me that I'm like, wow, yeah, that's that. I engage him and ask him questions about why God, why are these feelings stirring up on the inside of me? And so I'm sitting early in the morning, and just sitting before the Lord with my journal out, asking questions to the Lord, and then sometimes just being and just sitting and allowing him and his presence to be around me and felt within me. I have found no better way to keep my cup filled than that. And of course, that leads to I want to read scripture. I want to read what has been written in history. I just think in any way we can, the way we have to keep our cup filled is by being intentional to set aside time to quiet our hearts before the Lord and just be willing to see if he would speak to you. And I think you'd find out that he will. And that to me just fills it, man. I leave with a revelation. And that's just our way to say I leave with like an understanding of something in my life. Like just the other day, I was thinking like, Lord, why, when I'm really tired, do I go to this sort of like numb out behavior? Like I just want to, when I'm exhausted, like I've preached, I've done ministry, I'm just going. What I want to do is just escape everything. And I just want to just chill out and relax and numb out. And I'm sitting there the other day, just sitting before the Lord saying like, God, why do I go there? And I'm allowing him then to speak into that and reveal to me why is it that I go into that mode when I'm really tired and it's unhealthy behavior for me, even if it's just sitting there and watching TV, just staring at something. I'm like, that's not doing anything good for me. That kind of stuff. Then I can emerge from those moments and then I've got something to give somebody. I'm like, have you ever felt like you just want to just numb out? Okay, well, look, this is what God just ministered to me in that moment. So it just keeps my cup filled, being intentional to take that time to just separate out and shut out noise and listen to his voice.
How do you coach somebody through? I talk a lot about the concept of progress over perfection. So on a person's spiritual walk, maybe they're starting in a dark place. It's easy for me to understand. I was born and raised in the church. And so a lot of these terms I can pick up quickly, but maybe somebody who's not as familiar with the church or just having a spiritual connection to God, or maybe they don't even know what that means. How do you encourage somebody on that walk and coach them and guide them? What do you recommend?
Yeah, it's great, man. It's great. And I would say, really, there is no such thing as the end, as the perfection, as a destination. It's all about that journey in progress. And so when you say, as soon as you claim, if I get to there, then I'll be perfect. And that's the very point at which it's just going to extend another thing, because then that destination becomes our God, if you will. It becomes, that's what I'm trying to aim at. And it's like, I don't need perfection. What I need to work on is making sure that I am putting into play the strategies and processes and what we would just call spiritual disciplines, rhythms, rituals, behaviors that are aiming me at Jesus. I've had the privilege to walk with a lot of people, and myself included, but I've even sat with you some, Matthew,
No
and
doubt.
talked to
Yeah,
you a
no
little bit
doubt.
about this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
man, I start my whole theories start with grace. Most people know where they're screwed up, and they don't have to be reminded of it. I mean, sometimes they need to be held accountable, or they need to be, there needs to be some tough love, some boundaries to be drawn. But I start with, hey, dude, you are loved. You're fully loved right now. You're accepted, even where you're at. Just the exact place that you are right now. You couldn't be any more loved than you are right now. I start there just to help people lower that guard, because, like you said, it's a human condition to be like, well, okay, what can I do to get to there, to be perfect, to get to there? Jesus is constantly coming at that and lowering that unhealthy pursuit of perfection, because what that is my ego stepping up to say, if I act that way, then I'll be better internally. My identity changes if I act better. It's like, well, hold on. Jesus formed you. Jesus calls you who you are, not your behavior, not your work ethic, not your willpower. There's nothing fails like willpower. The more we try to make it happen on our own power and try to get into that place, the more we need to be calm down a little bit and say, hold on, no, Jesus is my identity. And so I start with grace, and then I just walk them through their day. Like, what is it about your life right now? Where is Jesus inviting you to participate with him? And so we ask those questions like, listen, I love to read the Bible, but some people, and this might sound really controversial to some people don't need to start with reading the Bible. Maybe you need to start with finding intentional ways to be kind to your wife. Maybe you need to start with, hold on, looking like Jesus is living out of rest. So maybe you don't need to start with like reading the Bible and fasting and trying to figure out a prayer life. Maybe you need to start with 20 minutes of just silence in the morning, stopping. You know what I'm saying? Rest is one of those things. This is a little tangent, but rest is one of those things. It's like, listen, our world doesn't know what rest is all about. We just are going from one thing to the next, yada, 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 yada. And rest is like a shooting the bird to the culture of the world. I don't have to do to be accepted and loved. I can actually just be, and I can be accepted and loved just by sitting. So 20 minutes in the morning might be that thing that you need right now. And so start with grace, and then coach people into, where is Jesus? What is Jesus inviting you to do? Not what do I feel like I should do? What is Jesus inviting you to do? So those are some of the ways. And then once we start, then it's like, okay, now practice it. Now tell me where your hangups are. And then we can work through, okay, what is causing that hang up? My distracted mind. Okay, well, why is your mind so distracted? Now let's break that down a little bit, and it can get kind of practical. But those are some of the steps I would do.
And it's so counterintuitive I mean, we're talking to essentially mostly a business minded, entrepreneurial minded, go getter minded audience. And we're definitely not like, that's not the only box that we're serving here, but that's the general context, the hustler mindset. And with that comes a lot of ambition and the need and the desire to go, 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 go. And you're sitting here and you're telling me that I need to prioritize letting go and releasing and not setting my identity into what I can achieve. And I got to tell you, man, I personally have a hard time with that. Just hearing you say it almost means like I have to let go of my goals and what I want to get. How would you talk through that with this hypothetical person?
Well, so yeah, totally. I know it's hypothetical. It couldn't be you or me or anybody on this call. Absolutely not. We're all perfect. We're great. We're awesome. I feel that, man. I feel that deep in my soul. I really do. I feel sometimes that drive kicks in to do more so I can be better. That's my go-to. My go-to is work hard. After I did that at 17, I got into construction, bought my first house at 20, worked full-time construction, remodeled it for 8 months, sold it after about a year and a half, bought my next one, remodeled it for about 9 months, sold that one, bought the next one. I'm just like, then I started ministry, then kept remodeling houses, kept running a business on the side. Like, that's been my struggle as well, man, big time. I remember being a youth pastor, and I remember counting, we count attendance every time. And I remember sitting there and counting attendance and feeling like a bad pastor because we weren't at the numbers that I wanted us to be at. And then I felt like a failure. And then I started getting upset at the students You need to invite your friends. And I started getting aggressive. Like, hey, in other words, you have to do something for me to be okay with myself.
Wow.
I need you. I need you to show up and invite people into this room so that that in number at the end of the night can tell me that I'm good and I'm okay. And when I realized that, I realized I'm being a manipulative pastor.
Wow.
I'm not helping people. I'm taking from them. When it comes to business, what I've found in these last 16 years of being in ministry, there are a lot of very successful and very wealthy people that have very broken families, very lonely. Not everybody, and there's incredible people out there doing great things and very successful. I think you have to ask yourself, what does success really look like for you? Does success look like your bank account? Because there's going to be a day where you could have a lot of money in your bank account, and then you'll realize I'm still not okay. Does success look like? I know a friend of ours was in the NFL and he won the Super Bowl, and he was in the ice bath afterwards and sitting with the teammates, and it dawned on them that they've reached the top of the mountain. Where do you go from here? So does success look like winning a Super Bowl? Because you might win it one day, and then what? And then you got to find another mountain. It's just another thing. I think you have to stop and you have to think about the person you want to become is more important than the things you want to accomplish, because the person you're becoming will determine how you accomplish the things you're going to accomplish. And how is almost always more important than the what. The what is the goal, the what is the status, the what is the what is, it can be whatever you want it to be. How it's done, you could do it unethically, you could do it to cheat your way there, you could do it to hustle your way there and forget your family, you could do it and lose sight of friendship and community. But how you do it, or you could do it from the place of rest and still accomplish the what. So I think you have to determine that. And for me, the most important thing that I would tell people is not what you want to accomplish, but it's the person you're becoming. That person will be able to go through all of the goals. They don't get too angry if something goes wrong because they know it's going to be okay. They're okay. And they don't get too low if it doesn't go their way, because they know they're okay. So that's just some of the, I don't know, some of the thoughts I would have. I'm really passionate about that because I know I've struggled with that in my own life.
No, that's beautiful, man, and that's so real and vulnerable. I had a mentor tell me a few years ago when I was grinding, and he warned me that you got to think about your identity, and specifically in this context, he said your relationship with God as an anchor, and you need that anchor to be strong, and you need it to be firm and solid, because as you're young and coming up, that anchor, it can afford to be, think about that anchor is attached to a boat that's closer to shore. And
Yeah.
as you're getting and preparing yourself to go farther out, the farther you go out, if your anchor cannot handle the deeper water, you will get lost at sea. And I'll never forget that. It
Yeah.
absolutely changed my mind, and I struggle with it all the time because here I am, and back then, and fast forward to now, I've come a long way in what I've been building, but there's still such a sense of unaccomplishment,
Yeah.
and it can feel the same, even though I can do more, I have more. It doesn't really feel that different. And so it's very convicting. And I feel the need to start searching for that identity sooner rather than later. How has mentorship, how have you been able to receive mentorship from others? And how has that been important as you are a mentor to others?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So those are two great, incredible questions. I would say in connection to this, honestly, when I was that youth pastor that I was talking about, I had a mentor. He was actually my boss, but I received him as my pastor. Sometimes you can have a boss that's like, he's just your boss. And then other times he's like,
100%.
that's my dude.
Yeah.
And I received him that way. And so he was speaking into my life. And I remember this is when I was going, man. It was like, I was going to speak at youth camps. I was doing construction. We were crushing it in our public school system. And so it was football night, Friday night lights and all this stuff. I was just going, going, going. And so he sat me down in a one-on-one and he said, Landon, I said, yeah, what's up? He goes, today I just have one question. I only want to process one question with you today. And normally, you're talking about dates. And there's a lot we're talking about in a one-on-one session.
KPIs,
Oh
the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Like
Yeah,
where's the status on that? Where are we at on this? Where's the other?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's about one thing. We're going to talk about one thing today. I said, okay, what's up? He goes, I just want to know why you hate your wife.
Wow.
And I said, what? I go, hey, Steve, I don't hate my wife, man. He goes, I don't know. I'm kind of confused too. I don't know why. She seems like a great gal. So like, why do you hate her? I said, I thought, Steve, I don't hate my wife, man. And he said, I know, I can't connect the dots. I don't understand. Why do you hate your wife? And then of course, I was like getting a little like angry. And I'm like, dude, I don't hate my wife. And he had printed out my calendar and he slides my calendar over to me and he says, well, to me, your calendar says that you hate her. Your calendar says you don't want to spend any
Oh,
time with her. Your calendar says you'd rather do other things than hang out with her. So why? Why do you want to do that? And I was like, and of course, for me, it was what I needed for my eyes to be open to see that I'm chasing the wrong things. And so you say, what is it like to be open to a mentor? Dude, I don't know where I would be if I was not open to receiving that kind of love. And let me tell you, that is love. It's love for a leader in your life, a pastor in your life, a mentor in your life to talk to you at that level. Because for me at that time in my life, I needed like someone to punch me in the face and say, bro, what are you doing? Now I by God's grace, I feel like I'm a little softer. Maybe sometimes I might still need it, but I feel like I'm a bit softer to receive it and realize it and self-aware enough to go, oh, I think I know where this is coming from. But when I'm running like that, I'm sourcing my identity in the things that I do. And I need somebody to come to me and say, you are not what you do. The success of your life will not be hung on the accomplishments of your life. And I need to hear that. Your listeners need to hear that. Have you ever been to a funeral and they're like, listen, they built a great business. They had a lot of money. Listen, that person right there. You never hear that.
no.
What you hear is they were a great person. Every time I was around them, we laughed and we felt loved. Or you hear the opposite. You don't hear much, but you don't hear about accomplishments. And I think that's telling. I think in our Western culture, we're chasing success because my ego is so alive to think if I gain these accomplishments, then people will look at me and think I'm great. And I need to realize that God's called me great already. He's called me great already. Success is not about accomplishment. And so I needed that. And I need a mentor in my life to speak into me. And still to this day, man, still to this day. I mean, it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Same guy. He sat me down and said, hey, man, you seem like you're a little critical right now. Is everything okay? And I'm like, no, man, I'm stressed out. I'm busy, yada, yada. I'm able to pour out my life. And I'm telling you, we need people like that in our life. And I think for me, it shows me how to be a better mentor to others if I'm receiving it from somebody in my own life. So I don't know if that answered the second question, but
No, that's really good. That's high level on multiple fronts. First, that I want to tackle high level from Steve as a mentor to know how to say it to you that would make the right impact. Like it
right.
takes a lot. You really have to know and be intentional about the people around you to know how to get to them because most of us are so internally focused that we're not really looking out and studying the people around us. So kudos first for that, and then second to actually have the courage to come to you, but also like that's straight up love. I mean, we get
Yeah.
so caught up with being nice, and on the surface it's nice, but it's really cruel to allow somebody to continue to go down a path that you love and not call them out. So that's
Right.
huge. And then also for you, I mean, that's the your response was our typical first response was the tightening up. Like, I don't understand where you're going, but no, this is not me. This is not my identity. But being able to see it, and probably because you respected the relationship, that you were willing to hear him out, that you didn't just storm out of there. Do you think that your response would have been different 10 years, 5 years earlier? Do you think do you think it takes a level of maturity and self-awareness to be able to hear when somebody's calling us out and giving us criticism?
I think for sure, specifically if there's no relational connection. There's no
Mm,
if you have somebody who's not deposited into the relational bank
yeah.
between the two of you, then it's
So that's
hard to hear.
important to note
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
There's got to be a lot of emotional and relational capital there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Relational
that's good.
capital has to be there. And for us, we had that, and I respected him for that. And this was the toughest conversation he'd ever had with me in that regard. But man, he's had other ones too. And our thing that he's really imparted in my life, and you said it just a minute ago, and you said it so well, and he calls it truth and love. And of course, that comes from scripture. It's not truth and love, it's truth in love. And so there is not a lot of people use that phrase just to be like, all right, I'm gonna give you some truth and love, and then they beat you up. Their words. All right, here you go. Listen, I need to be truth and love.
Get
Here,
ready.
and then it's just an excuse for them to like retaliate and be all angry and be mad. That's not it.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's not it. And so it's not just truth because that's mean, and it's not just love because that can be enabling. It's truth in love, and when we're speaking that way, then at the same time, man, I'm doing this for your good. And so this is one of the ways that we address things as mentors. We do not address instances. We address patterns. Anybody can be having a bad day and do something stupid, say something stupid. And now if that's an interaction that was big enough, we still need to address and be like, hey man, that was kind of messed up. you know? But when it comes to a pattern, that's when we sit down and say, okay, this is truth and love that they might not see that they're consistently behaving in this way. And that is the most loving thing for me to do is come to them and be like, man, I don't know if you see this, but this is it. And so that's one of the things that we're really big on in our culture. We want to help people grow by letting them see some of the patterns in their life. But we're not trying to be mean, man. We're not trying to just beat people up from every behavior, instance, or action. It's like, no. There's certain things that we can focus on that we believe are going to really help you if they change. So it's kind of how we do it.
Oh, that's good, man. I pitch and shout all the time the phrase "kill them with kindness,"
Mm.
and emphasis: kill them, beat them up with kindness. And it really goes back to just you 100% of the time can defuse a situation and move forward towards growth if you lead with kindness, and it's not softness, but it's kindness in the care. So I like that truth
Yep.
in love. The other
And
thing you made me think about. Oh, go ahead. What were you gonna
I was
say?
going to say, that's kind of scriptural there
Mm.
because scripture says it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance, which repentance means to turn 180 degrees. So to change the way you think about something, repentance, to change the way one thinks about it. So it's actually kindness that leads us to change the way we think about a circumstance. And sometimes that kindness is a boundary. Sometimes that kindness can be tough love. It's the kindest thing for me to do to you is to hold a boundary here because you're hurting yourself and other people. And so we're going to
Wow.
hold a boundary. But that is a kind thing to do that can lead and will lead people to changing the way that they think about something.
I appreciate that add on, man. Something that you said earlier that it made me think of that I thought was funny. So we used to have on staff a lady named Teresa, beautiful, beautiful soul, such a nice lady, but she was a handwriting expert. And she looked at my handwriting one time and she looks at me and first thing she says, you have a pain in your left foot. I had broken my toe like 3 weeks earlier and I didn't believe anything that she said, but you better believe as soon as she said that, I sat right down. I was like, what else do you see here? And she goes, it seems like based on your writing, you can be pretty like when you actually believe in something or you feel something is true, you can be very dogmatic about it and almost stubborn, and it puts you in situations where you often don't listen to other people's like advice or coaching. And in the moment I was like, well, that's not me at all, but I've literally seen it, and this was maybe 5 months ago. I find myself consistently in these situations where I am just hardened to hearing other people, and I feel like it's pushed the people in my circle maybe away from wanting to reach out. And I just, as I continue to grow though, I've had the opposite where I've had people who only go with what I say. And it seems it's so dangerous to not have somebody in your circle who is offering that counterbalance to check you. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it where people, they just completely reject that. And then how does that affect their life?
Oh yeah, yeah, man. And it is sad. It's really sad when people they're and most often they're just so hurt. And I'm not speaking to you. I know you're. This is the handwriting said you can be like this, but as long as I've known you, you've at least been open a little bit for that in a lot of ways. But most people who are just rejecting any sort of mentor or help or correction, and they've just been so wounded.
Mm.
There's typically been such a deep wound for leaders that have abused them maybe in the past, or father figures, mother figures that have abused them in the past, that they have to forge their own way and they can't receive it.
How do you
Um,
come back from that? How do you guide somebody? Is that, do they just have to do that all the way on their own?
no, and you it typically it's one of those, you know how Steve, do you hate your wife? It's one of those, hey, who hurt you? It's
Mm.
like a statement of like, you're not you're not rejecting me right now. And I mean, I could care less if you reject me. You put somebody else's face on my face in this meeting right now, and I'm no longer in the room. You're rejecting somebody that hurt you a long time ago. So who hurt you? They have to. Sometimes it's therapy that allows them to open up to see the wounding that causes them to push back from leaders in their life. The independent spirit is not just a. It's not just this leader spirit. It's a rebellion. It can be a rebellious spirit in some instances that is birthed out of deep hurt and deep wound, and this thing that I'm going to have to take care of myself because nobody's going to take care of me. And sometimes if that stays too long, then you'll look up and you're the only person around you. And
Wow.
there's no more dangerous place to be than being out alone. And we know that in many different circumstances and ways, but that means you're going to be picked off. And again, it's like you're the average of your five closest friends.
Amen.
If you don't have any close friends, you're all you got. There's nobody smarter than
Wow.
you. Nobody smarter than you. Nobody better than you.
Yikes.
Nobody pulling you up. Nobody that you're gleaning from other than a book you read or a podcast you listen to. So, like, to me, it doesn't even make sense. But I know where that comes from because I've experienced some of that in my own life, of just the wounding from people that causes the shut off from leaders. And I'm compassionate towards it. But that's where sometimes we have to lead. Other times it can be pretty. It can be gentle, and is if they're on a journey of self-awareness and discovery, they might see it and realize, oh yeah, that's in me. And then let's step towards healing and from this thing. But yeah, I know those are kind of Christian terms, healing and whatever, but if you'd like, it's therapy, it's self-discovery of realizing your childhood trauma affects your adulthood life. And that's so real. That's so real. So
Oh, dude, thank you so much for that. That was, anybody listening, their emotional intelligence just went up 10
mm,
points if they actually like take notes and really listen and hear what you just said. So I have like two different avenues that I could take this down now. I wanted to talk. I know you are highest skill rated theologian that I personally know, and I wanted to talk about some theologians and books and tools, but that's on one side. I like where we're going right now and talking about community and how that goes into the church as a whole and the role of the church in the even greater community, you know, in society and whatnot. So I guess I'll turn it back to you. And I want to respect your time. You know, we can go for another 10, 15 minutes or so, but I really wanted to, I had both of those in mind. And so we
yeah.
can kind of target one or the other.
It's perfect. Perfect. So I'd love
No
to
problem.
go at, yeah, I'd love to go at the community thing
Sure.
and church. It's something that a lot of people are processing right now. And in the
Yeah.
theological term, it's called ecclesiology. And that would be, what is the role, what is the purpose of the church proper? Like Sunday morning service and the community that represents? What's the purpose of it?
Mm.
And and I am just, let me just start by saying I am in love with the church. I'm in love with it. It's what, oh God, I'm not going to cry or anything. It's just, I know that God has called me to a group of people and he's called me to the church. And I believe it. I still believe it's the hope of the world, because not because there's a bunch of people, not because we meet on Sundays, not because we sing songs or listen to people talk about the Bible, because Jesus himself, in some mystical way, is in the middle of each person in their soul. Like somehow in the person themselves, Jesus is right there. And when we gather, it's almost like, wow, God is among us. And when that happens, man, you watch out, anything can happen. So I want to start by saying, like, I believe in the church. And at the same time, I think there's been, I've felt in my own life a struggle of what are we doing? What are we doing here? And I think so. We're on around a 300-year journey or so around what we call the evangelical movement. So what we know is like Protestantism, and I don't know how nerdy you want me to get here,
Let's
buddy.
go, man. Let's do it. Come on, take us there with you.
So there was a separation specifically. I mean, there was a schism between Orthodox and Catholicism, so the Catholic and the Orthodox tradition, when the Pope wanted to do some things, and the Orthodox claims that they're the original. They have the faith of the apostles. And that was involved in what they call the Catholic. When all the creeds came out, Catholic means universal, so that was involved. It was just one big church, and then Orthodox and Catholic split, and then in the 1500s, we Protestants split from the Catholic tradition. Protestants to protest, to say something. And you remember, this is Martin Luther nailing his 95th thesis and saying, look, there's some things in here that I think we're doing that are crazy. And he was right. He also was not trying to split off. He wanted to remain Catholic, but they rejected him. And so he kind of started Lutheranism right after his life. So now you have three main streams. You have Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant. And out of Protestantism is like thousands of denominations now.
Right.
It's all in the same sort of lane. And really from that point, in one way or another, there started this journey that emerged of what we call evangelicalism. Evangelicalism comes from that Greek word, the euangelion, which is to like preach the gospel, as they would call it. And what we're trying to do is reach the world with the message of Jesus Christ, and that's such an awesome call. And that comes out of the end of Matthew, the end of Luke, the end of Mark, the end of John, even, but in its own way, but saying, now you go make disciples of all the nations. And so out of this evangelical movement has come incredible missions work. We've taken the gospel to places that no other denomination or no other style in our tradition has. And I think it's led us down a road where we have to stop and think about what the end goal is. Okay, so now let me pause and maybe bring an application. If I'm working out and I'm like, in my head, I want to be a golfer. I'm like, I want to be a golfer. That's my goal. But in practicality, I'm following a bodybuilder. And then all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, wait a second, I am too big, because I've been working out. I've been doing the wrong. I feel like that's supposed to be my destination, but I've been doing the wrong thing. And therefore I'm not going to make it to the type of body I want to have to be that person. And I think in the same way, you say that I want to be, the destination is X. I look up and I'm nowhere even close to where I'm supposed to be because of little subtle movements along the way, little subtle turns along the way, and say if you're navigating a plane or boat. And I think in some ways that's what we've done in the church. So the evangelical movement has morphed into, specifically the last 100 years, has morphed into this idea that the number one goal is to get people into a building and to pray a sinner's prayer to make sure that they go to heaven when they die. Okay. Would that sound familiar?
Oh, that's how I was, church as I've been raised. That was the whole point, it seemed like.
Okay. So the whole point, and that's how I was raised, the whole point is to get in the building or on the street, to go to the street and to make sure somebody prays this prayer so that when they die, they go to heaven. Okay, so hear me again. I love the church and I love my church and all the things. And I think the only problem with that is Jesus's teachings himself. He just doesn't teach it that way. In fact, when he says, here's how I want you to pray. And do you remember this prayer? Our Father who is in, and a good translation there is the heavens, not heaven. Our Father who is in the heavens, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is being done in the heavens. So in other words, Jesus wants his rule and reign to actually transform the world to where one day the entire world will be under the reign and rule of our perfect, loving Father. That what is said of the heavens and his kingdom will be true of earth. So the end goal is not to go to heaven when I die, but the end goal is to transform the earth, because this is where I'll be. Because at the end of the age, God creates the new heavens and the new earth. I live on earth for the rest of eternity. I'm making some leaps here for people who might not know scripture super well, but my point in saying this is I think we've created a wrong destination. And now here we are, and it's like, what is church now? Because all I'm trying to do is get people in the door and get them to pray this prayer. Get people in the door to get them to pray this prayer. Now it's become mechanical. Now it's become consumeristic. Now it's become individualistic. Now it's just about me getting in the room so that I can go to heaven when I die. And all the while, I think Jesus is like, what is happening? That's not what I came to do. That's, again, my humble opinion. And in a lot of ways, I could be dead wrong. And what I think I've come alive to is the realization that God wants to transform me first and foremost. God wants to transform me on the inside out, where I become a person of love. He's not so much concerned about me praying a prayer so that I go to some place. He's concerned about me actually taking the teachings of Jesus and applying them to my life, transforming me from the inside out so that I naturally and automatically live my life like Jesus. That is the goal of Christianity. The goal is that every human that would say yes to the way of Jesus would actually look like Jesus in the world. So that one day there will be an entire world of people living the Sermon on the Mount, not hating, but loving, not having enemies because they pray for them. You know, it's like this, the whole culture right now is trying to be an us versus them. We're right, you're wrong. We're liberal, you're conservative. We're in, you're out. Jesus was constantly removing the line of separation and saying, I am they. And he was constantly bringing in the other side, constantly saying, you can't have an enemy if you love them. They're not your enemy. He said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Think about a world in which that was the goal. The goal was becoming like Jesus so that every day I'm living out a totally different way of living. See, the world system wants to get ahead, be better, be stronger, the world system wants to dominate so that I can succeed, push others down so that I can get ahead. And Jesus says, I'm coming underneath you. The leader of all is the servant of all. I mean, it's backwards kingdom. And when a culture is living like that, the culture is living out the kingdom. But in my opinion, I don't think you're going to get that culture if our goal is for each individual person to go to the good place when they die.
Does the entire structure of the organization and of the system have to change if it's been built to achieve this end goal, this data set? And if you actually break it down and in the way that you did, and it makes perfect sense, how does the structure, or maybe the people within the already established church, how does the mindset and then the actions need to change?
No, that's great, man. I honestly think it's the shifts. I think when you refocus a church to that goal and say, no, our goal is to look like Jesus. Our goal is to be his representatives, expanding and releasing the kingdom wherever we go, right here, right now. Like heaven is here. And this is another point of saying the heavens are the heavens among us. And in Hebrew thought, there was a third heaven, which is that sort of celestial level. There was the second heaven, which is what we would call like our ozone layer. And there was the first heaven, which is just our sky, like the air outside, the air around us, the air that we see. And now what I think is interesting is we have what's the new telescope? I was just seeing that the other day, the pictures of it. And we can
Oh, I
see
wouldn't.
millions and millions of light years away now, galaxies that are still sort of being formed. And you know what they haven't found? They haven't found heaven. And have you ever asked yourself, like, if heaven's up there, where is it? Certainly we would have found it.
Yeah.
It's not up there. In fact, I think Jesus, and this is a little tangent, but I think Jesus, when he ascended, he just went out of sight. And he's around us. I think heaven is all around us. We're not trying to go. Heaven wants to be here. Heaven wants to be among us. Heaven and earth always want to meet. And this is what we see in Genesis in the garden. It's what we see in the temple. It's what we see in Jesus. It's now he's in us expanding. God is constantly trying to merge heaven and earth. We're not trying to get somewhere up there. Jesus is trying to get in us so that he releases all around us, so that heaven actually becomes what is on earth. And so I think if we can get that focus shift, now all of a sudden I get people seeing that. Now by the Spirit, people are going, oh, I'm called to release heaven all around me, to release the law of Jesus, which is grace and love and truth. I'm called to release that. Now then, I think community is different. I think we can still have small groups, but man, it's not just small groups. It's like we're doing life together. You know, we're sharing meals together. We're taking care of the needy among us. We're loving. We're imaging what we saw in Acts in the book of Acts. People who are filled with power, seeing transformation happen, and loving the people among them, taking care of widows and orphans. And that happens when people get that vision for the release in the kingdom. So I don't think there's it's not a fundamental, it is very fundamental. It's not a structural shift in the programs of the church, but it is a fundamental shift in the vision of the church.
It's almost like the function of the actual church in the building is set, but we're talking about taking the church out of the church and including it in everything else that we're doing and how we live as individuals and how we build out groups.
That's it. That's exactly
Okay.
right. That's exactly right. And so what ends up happening in our current model is you get a lot of groupthink. The churches end up becoming, Martin Luther King Jr., Sunday, the 11 o'clock hour on Sunday morning, still the most segregated hour of the week.
Wow.
And that's not just segregated in ethnicity. It's segregated in thought. It's segregated in power. It's segregated in locations. It is, the church can, in our context, become, this is what I want to hear. These are the kind of people I want to be around. Therefore, tell me what I want to hear. Preach the doctrine that I like and resonate with. Where I think you see Jesus is over and over again. The woman at the well, the Samaritan, the leper. I was just reading this the other day. The 10 lepers that were healed. A Samaritan came back and he loved on them. Which Samaritan Jews, they just did not get along. So many scenarios where Jesus is constantly bringing in the other. He's welcoming the other. And so I think we have to get away from this us versus them way of doing church. And in the early church, there was no building. It was this renegade group of people that believed, they were a renegade group of Jews that believed Jesus was really their Messiah. And they were persecuted. So their church was in homes. And it was around a meal. And it was wealthy to poor. And Paul even scolds some of them because he's like, hey, you wealthy people, you're getting to the table first because you didn't have to work all day because you have money. And the poor people are coming in late and they don't have any food to eat because you're fat and you've been eating it all. And you're drunk at the party because you drank all the wine and the poor people don't have any wine to drink. And he's like, stop it. Well, now, why is he having to do that? Because their church was the home. And so, to your point just a second ago, it is entirely about us taking who we are and actually being that, becoming the kind of people that live life in community, that we gather on Sunday. I mean, because it's encouraging and good, but I live my life in community. I live my life with people that know me, people that can call me out, people that love me, people that are pouring into me and helping us. And so I think it's all the above. We have to really see this fundamental shift that then gets it in us to the world around us. So
Do you think eventually there will be a church beyond the church, like the way that church has evolved the last 2,000 years? Will there be another form of creating community in what was initially intended that might look nothing like what we know
yeah,
church as today?
maybe I know there's certain, if I'm hearing your question right, I think there's certain people I can think of, church home, who they're creating like online community church, like where people can just jump online, and then they're pushing towards just have small groups, watch the content, and then live life in like your small group in whatever city you're in. So they're kind of helping people connect that way. So like you get on the app and then realize who's in your area and then connect. But I don't know. I personally don't know that there's any other way to do it than people in proximity with one another. I'm not saying be a commune and live together.
Seems like it's got to be very localized, and we got to
Yeah,
be able to pull the resources together to help and to build and to grow the
yeah,
community and just be a resource
yeah, man.
for others around us, you know.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
what resources would you, let's go back to the resources now as we close out. What resources, what books do you recommend that might challenge people's perspective, but maybe gives a range of intensity? You know, maybe somebody that the beginner can kind of start to study and then grow.
Oh man.
You put me on a few, man. Richard Rohr, Dallas Willard.
Yeah, but Dallas
Who
Willard is
else we
not.
got?
He's not for the faint of heart. Like in other words, he can be hard to read some, but he would be the person I would want anybody listening, if you're at all interested in kind of getting a refocus. Maybe people have been burned on church. He's helped me so much. Just remind me of what this thing's all about. And so yeah, Dallas Willard, Divine Conspiracy is one of his books. Renovation of the Heart, Hearing God. I mean, there's even more, but I would say John Ortberg would probably be a great resource. John Ortberg has several books out. He was actually personally discipled and mentored by
Is that
Dallas Willard.
Elimination of Hurry? Ruthless
No,
Elimination of
that's
Hurry?
so that's another person that would be great, but that's John Mark Comer.
Okay.
So
Okay.
John Mark Comer, I know this is kind of a trail here, but John Mark Comer, who just came out with Live No Lies last year, which is a great book on sort of the strongholds of the world, the flesh, and the devil. He also wrote The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which was inspired by a Dallas Willard quote. But John Ortberg, he also has Garden City, which is really good. But John Mark Comer was mentored by John Ortberg, and John Ortberg was mentored by Dallas Willard. So it's kind of
Got it.
they sort
Okay.
of have a similar as viewpoint on discipleship, spiritual formation, and the formation of the church. So that's kind of those roads. But those three are great, and it's probably in that row would be most accessible. Probably
Got
John
it.
Mark Comer, Ortberg, and then Willard would be the most accessible path. But man, I'll tell you this. I got a book right here. This book right here. Okay, I don't know if you're going to show this, but it's called "The Gift of Being Yourself." The Gift of Being Yourself.
Okay. Nice.
And it's by David Benner. And I would say if you're looking to kind of discover God on the inside, go down that journey, The Gift of Being Yourself. It's a real short book, and it's the sacred call to self-discovery. Wow. It will challenge you, man. It'll challenge you and uncover some of those aspects of your life that need to change. And you know they need to change. And I know aspects of my life that need to change. It's a beautiful book. So there's some for sure.
Oh, that's great, man. I've challenged myself that if anybody on here has a book recommendation, I will read the book and then I'll make at least an episode on it, or I'll touch on the content in a follow-up episode. I've learned so much from people and from books and resources, and there's really no excuse to level up yourself and your growth. It just determines, how intentional are you going to be and how bad you want it. Dude, Pastor Landon, my brother, dude, this was phenomenal. Just value add, man. I appreciate you so much. Is there anything that you're like excited about that's popping right now? Things that, maybe in your personal life or church with what you've got going on that just you're excited about, that things that you've seen, God kind of maybe answer some prayers or anything.
Yeah, man. So two things. One personal thing I'm excited about is I went back to college. So
Hey,
it's kind of fun journey. I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, this is just, some of my books, but I just love to read and love to learn. And so this has been, it's a cool journey to start. But man, I'll tell you what I'm most excited about is watching Jesus transform people's lives. Man, I know it in my own life. Like I'm better today than I was a year ago, and I was better a year ago than I was the year before.
amen.
And man, watching people who, and again, I'm telling myself included, but over the last 5 years, who've just been wrecked. Like their life was hard. They've were really struggling, and to see them grow, find healing, find freedom, sometimes go to therapy and discover stuff and grow in their own self, and then watching Jesus just make them whole. Like, dude, it works. It's not like a something. It's not a box you check for the weekend to make you a good person. Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people live. And dude, without that, dude, we're just dead. And I know for me, like, it's hard to find hope. And then I have to hold on to goals and strategies, yada, 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 yada. So man, I've just come alive. I've been just really meditating recently, telling a lot of people over the last couple of days about just how cool God is, how much better the world around me looks. And I know things try to look dark and dingy and the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And I just believe it's the opposite. People around me are growing. People around, I don't, not because of me, but because Jesus is doing some cool stuff. And
Wow, what a perspective. I hear people all the time talk about, actually, recently, there's been two or three people that I've either listened to or I've come across that have traveled and have had that experience of interacting with a multitude of people in a short time frame. And they referenced how on the media it shows all this bad, bad, bad. When you actually look at the people around and engage with others, there's a lot of good and that doesn't always get captured. And so it's really cool, man. Um, well, again, man, I appreciate you so much. Love you, dude. One thing left to say, man, stay humble, stay hungry, stay streetwise. Peace. Yeah, it's funny because whenever I go on my morning runs, the last like 2 or 3 days, I'll get up and I'll go on my run, and it's so humid and literally all these curls. It is just a pure puff whenever I come back, dude. But yeah, it's getting long. I got to figure out what I'm gonna do with it.
and then what? And then you got to find another mountain. It's just another thing.